The old model was a world of, and I'm talking 1 or 2 years ago, the old model. The old model is a world of gatekeepers, somebody who would say yes and no to everything. Gatekeeper is a person who can do funding, yes, no. Gatekeeper is a person who can buy, sell a film, like a sales agent or a distributor or a TV station. Everything was depending on a gatekeeper opening a gate or closing it. And as you know, 98% of the time, a gatekeeper is spent is saying no because they only have so much money for whatever it is. The old model was a world of exclusivity. If somebody bought the rights in Germany, then they would own the rights for 15, 17 years. If somebody bought it in Scandinavia or in Denmark or in Sweden, whatever it was, that company who bought it would then own it for a number of years. The old world was also a model of territories. Germany, Japan, South Africa. And the old world was a world of windows, meaning that first it goes theatrical, then it goes to pay TV, then it goes to DVD, then it goes to free TV, and so on and so on. There was a gap in between. The old world was also what I call the dark matter. And I've sold hundreds and hundreds of feature films. Some great ones and some really bad ones. But in 90% of the cases, the distributors, 90% of the cases, the distributors never do any accounting to us as a sales agent. And this is not a distributor bashing session, by the way, if there's any distributors out there or whatever it is. I'm not trying to bash distributors. I'm just saying, in the old world, they paid us so much money up front that it was okay on the back end. We really didn't get that report that we did. And if we did get a report, you know, they said they did 1,000 posters or 500 posters. I could never check as a sales agent. I trusted them, but that was the world. So I call that matter the dark matter period because it's something you can't see, but it's out there. And the old model was also a model of one chance. Everybody hoping for that big Sundance hit or that big Cannes hit, get all the money and run, that big opening weekend. And if you didn't perform in Sundance or didn't perform in Cannes or you didn't perform that first weekend, you get kicked out. The new model, the new world, is a world of no gatekeepers. If somebody says no to you, it doesn't matter. You as a producer or filmmaker or whatever you are, you can just go to other sources, and we're going to go through these different options that are out there. It's a world of no gatekeepers. Nobody can say no to you anymore. It's a world of non-exclusivity. Instead of somebody owning it, you can actually own everything yourself as a filmmaker and license everything through the internet, through all the different sources, and I'm going to come through that. It's a world of no territories. If you learn anything from the pirates out there, that once it's up there, it's global. Why even think in territories? And one question, one concern I always get from producers, but what about if what if my film gets pirated? And I always say to them, if your film isn't already pirated, you should be insulted. What we have to look at is the legal means, the legal ways of trying to find money and make money as the old model is completely dead. So of course, a world no windows. If something has premiere everywhere at the same time. We need to look into that. I know the cinema chains are fighting this like there's no tomorrow, but it's the only way, I believe. It's a world of transparency. All the numbers are online. Everything is accounted for. It's so easy to have everything, to show for everything, as opposed to the old dark matter period. And it's also a matter of longevity. So once you put something up there, it stays up there and doesn't get taken down. It doesn't get kicked out of Blockbuster, or it doesn't get kicked out of the theaters once it's up there. All right, the studio world, just to put things in perspective, historically speaking, the idea of the script was always controlled by the studio. And of course, anybody could write a script, but once it was bought by somebody, then they controlled the rights to it. The financing was always controlled by a studio. They were the ones who would come up with the money. They were the ones who came up with the equipment. There was something we showed at Centropa back in the days, and what, 10, 15 years ago with the Dogma films, was that we can take a shitty camera and make a film and blow it up to 35mm. That was the first revolution. That was 15 years ago when we started owning the equipment. Instead of equipment being this big and cost a fortune, you can go out and buy a consumer camera and actually shoot a film. Now you can edit a film on a laptop like this. 10 years ago it was Avid that was the big revolution. You could buy equipment for only 75,000 euros and you can edit your own film. Now you can buy a laptop for 2,000 or 1,000 and edit it. Production was also owned by the studios, and the marketing aspects and the distribution aspects, all these things were controlled completely by the studio. And when I say studio, I mean the bigger companies. Now it's time for the independent producer, whether it's a one-man army or a 10-man army, no matter what it is, they can have all these things themselves. The scripts, of course, the financing, that's through crowdfunding and crowdsourcing. I'm going to talk about that later on. I keep saying later on, but don't worry, it's going to be more. The equipment, we talked about that, the production, marketing, and distribution. Good. But before we go really deep into it, I want to point out one of the flaws in the actual system, the actual theatrical model as a producer. And I'm going to use this billboard. I don't know if anybody can see it, if I should put it somewhere in the middle of the room. And shout very, very loud. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Good. All right, so the old way from a producer's point of view and as a sales agent point of view, let's say you have a film, it goes to the theaters, and we make a box office of 1 million euros. Let's say we make 1 million in the box office. This is great. Everybody's happy. The film is doing really well. Now, out of those box office, how much of that money does the producer keep? First, we've got to deduct sales taxes, VAT, whatever it's called. I don't know what it is in Brussels, Belgium. Does anybody know what it is in Belgium?
In Italy.
How much?
In Italy it's 20.
In Italy it's 20.
20.
Should we go with 20? I mean, it's 25 in Denmark. We can, let's go 20. Well, we're nice. Okay, so we say VAT, sales tax, whatever it is, 20%. So the first 20, I know when you calculate backwards, not really 20, but just for the example, because otherwise I can't calculate it in my head. I am blonde after all, so. So that's 200,000. So that goes 200,000 of the 1 million euros from the producer's point of view, okay? So now we have 800,000 left for the producer. Now, the question is the producer going to keep this? No, of course not. Not of course not, but unfortunately not. Now the money gets taken out by the theater. The theater who runs the venue, they take between 50 and 65%. That's how it works. It's a little bit scary. But I'll be very generous and very conservative and just say, let's just take 50% out. And as a producer's point of view, we don't get money for the advertising they put in front of the film. We don't get any money from the Coke and the popcorn, all the other stuff they're selling. I'm just pointing it out. So that goes 400,000 euros. All right. So do we keep that, the 400,000, as a producer? Does that money go in our pockets? No, of course not. It goes into the pocket of the distributor, because the distributor, and again, this is not the distributor bashing, I'm just putting out the numbers. The distributor, of course, has spent money, P&A, as you all know, they have spent on subtitling and advertising and prints and whatever. And let's just be generous and say they spent 200, 300,000, what numbers should we put, 200,000? Yeah, very conservative, we say 200,000. P&A. That means there's 200,000 left. Now, is the producer going to keep that amount of money? No, of course not. Because now the distributor who has recouped, if the distributor has recouped all his money, I'm just doing it very simple, and there's many different ways of doing this, but this is the very simplistic way of explaining it. If the distributor has recouped the P&A, the prints and ads, then they normally go into what's called a sharing mode. And now the distributor takes 50%. So now the distributor takes that 100,000, and that of course means there's 100,000 left for the producer. Okay.
And the other financiers.
And the other financiers and the actors, scriptwriters, and catering companies and whatever is out there. My point in showing this is the traditional way is the last person to get paid from the traditional theatrical view is the producer. And that's the model we've lived with for many years, and that has worked in some examples, in other examples not, but 10% of the number coming in front. It's a little bit scary. So have that in mind when we start talking about the other numbers. I'm going to roll this back in. All right, good.